Feet placement for beginners is probably one of the least agreed upon topics among wingfoil teachers, and that's for a reason, which we're gonna dig into because it's at the core of understanding feet placement. The job of the feet is to control the board, because they're the only part of your body that's touching it, and ultimately from almost any position you can learn to control the board. We can simulate this with our fingers. I can place them like this, but also like this, or in any position really, and I'm still always able to find a way to impart the force that I need. It's different in every position, but they all work. And the skill to accurately press on the board with your feet to make it do what you want from every position is a skill that depends on the control you have on the wing and on the rest of your body. Just like I have control of my arm and my fingers to move the phone, when I'm on the board, the only mechanical leverage that I have to push on the board is the wing. And so if I can't use the wing, I can't push the board with my feet how I want. In videos like controlling balance with the wing and leaning back importance, I've gone into details about this, so check in the description to find them. So all you gotta do at the beginning is to place them where you feel better for balance, and the three main options are both feet offset, back foot centered, front offset, and both centered. Both feet offset is probably the most natural one for many people because with your feet like this, your hips naturally aim this direction, which is what feels good for controlling the wing without twisting your body. The problem with this positioning is that every time you push on the back or the front, you'll make the board also lean sideways, which on big beginner boards is not the end of the world because they can remain stable even when leaning thanks to their size. But essentially, having the feet like this incentivizes you to keep your body weight equally distributed between your feet to avoid any sideways leaning and therefore loss of balance, which you might think sounds like a good thing. But in wingfoil, we don't actually need an equally distributed body weight most of the times. In fact, we constantly need the possibility to move the weight back and forth to control the foil. And this need is the most evident when board pumping, which requires swinging your weight back and forth with a lot of intensity and with zero lateral motion. The good news is that at the beginning, you don't actually need to pump. Despite pumping being quite an essential skill, in your first rides you don't need to worry about it, and you can progress all the way to takeoff with your feet offset, because takeoff can also happen without pumping. The catch is that this only works under the right conditions. If your board is big enough that you can already taxi while standing fairly far forward, then as the foil starts generating lift, you don't need to make a big weight shift to keep the board level. You can simply keep accelerating until the foil lifts you out of the water. The downside of standing that far forward is that the foil needs more speed before it generates enough lift, so you need plenty of power in the wing to reach that speed, a foil that's big enough to generate lots of lift, and water that's flat enough for you to stay balanced while you build that speed. And unfortunately, finding all these conditions at once, it's not always common. Both centered instead is perfect for separating the control of pitch and roll. You can pitch without rolling, you can roll without pitching, or combine them in any proportion. But at first impression can feel less good for balance because roll is controlled entirely by heel-toe pressure, plus your hips don't naturally want to look this way as much, they look more this way, and you have to use your muscles to turn them. And it can feel less intuitive to control the board and your balance from this slightly twisted body position. But keep in mind that opening the front foot towards the nose does help quite a bit with this hips rotation. Anyways, after a single session practicing this stance, it generally starts feeling quite familiar and good for balance. And this sets you up for learning everything with much more granular control on each board axis, which directly facilitates you in takeoff, board pumping, flight and speed control, and upgrading to smaller boards without much problem. So overall, this is my favorite because it's the most all-round positioning and solid foundation for progress. Finally, we have back-centered and front offset, which is a very interesting middle ground because it brings your hips to an almost perfectly natural position, like in both offset, but at the same time, it allows you to move your weight entirely on the back leg without making the board lean downwind, and this can help you in finding a good position for taxing upwind. Instead, the front foot more towards the upwind rail helps in counteracting the power of the wing when it is pulling hard and you're not quick enough to respond to it, and the pull shifts your body weight on your toes, and so the board starts leaning downwind, which brings you towards a forward fall. So if your front foot is not here, but here, your toes are still on the upwind side of the board, and so you can still counteract the pull of the wing and rebalance the board by pressing on your toes. This positioning tends to be a favorite for lightweight riders which feel the strength of the wind more. Although, having this increased leverage, it's not necessarily always good, because if it gives you a bigger buffer to avoid the forward fall, when you're not about to fall forward and the board is flat on the water, it will make it impossible for you to push on the front foot, because if you do, the board will start leaning upwind and you will lose balance. You can imagine this will be problematic for when you have to learn takeoff and you have to move all your body weight on the front foot. Positioning your feet in this way will disincentivize learning good timing of moving your weight forward for takeoff. But it will still be possible to take off in this way because you can simply make the board go up with the nose a little bit downwind to then be able to correct it by pushing with your front foot, which also pushes a little bit upwind. So again, we come back to the same theme, that you can do everything from any position, but as you can see, the cost of having your feet offset is that you have to tweak other things to balance out the effect of the offset. Another option still, which is not very common because it's a little bit extreme, but it can help some people, is offsetting even the back foot to the upwind side. When you're not very much in control of the wing, you might also not be very much in control of what part of your feet you're using to press on the board. And some people find themselves always pressing with the toes of the back foot, which makes the board lean downwind quite aggressively and makes them lose balance. So when you find yourself in this situation where you can't help but always push with your toes of the back foot, just put your toes on the midline or even a little bit more on the upwind side so that it becomes impossible for you to make the board lean downwind. But obviously the downside with this much offsetting of your body weight is that you're going to need a lot of wing power all the time to balance yourself out. So what position should you pick? And as you might already be guessing, you have to try them all and be analytical. Observe what kind of problems you have and what kind of falls you do, and based on your needs, you'll choose. If you feel you need more freedom to move your weight back and forth, go for both feet centered. If you feel your body position is too twisted for finding balance, go for both offset. If you're doing a lot of forward falls, go for back-centered front offset. And if you're still doing forward and also sideways falls, go for both offset upwind. As you might also imagine, your needs don't always stay the same as you gain experience and progress. So for example, you might start with both feet offset for your first 3 sessions, and then your goals change and you realize that you have to move that back foot somewhere else. The steps at which you're likely going to have to work out a new feet placement are: when you first start standing up, when you start working on efficient upwind course, when you start working on basic takeoff, and when you start working on pumping takeoff. Now, changing position of your feet at every stage of your learning is actually very good because it gradually brings you to realize that whatever feet placement you pick for achieving the goal that you're working toward, you're going to have to be very precise with your feet placement. Changing the foot position of a millimeter already makes a clearly noticeable difference even on a huge board, let alone when you will upgrade to smaller boards. So my advice is to try and be aware of how fine you need to be with your feet placement from the very get-go, because this is something that most students don't expect and lag quite a few sessions to realize. If you start noticing from the very start that small changes can make a big difference, then you're surely set for great success. This should settle this controversial topic. As I said at the beginning, the skill to control the board with your feet depends on the way you get and transfer the power of the wing to them. And once you're good at that, you'll be good with any feet placement. So check the playlist Technical Knowledge for Beginners of my beginner course to learn everything about that. Have a great time and keep flying.